Retrieval augmented generation. The first time I believe this was referenced was in a research paper published in about 2020 by the Fair Research Group out of Meta. And really what they were trying to do is say, look at LLMs. How do we make them more grounded on a specific data set? This does two things. It reduces hallucinations, but it also allows you to use your own corporate data. And we have a great lineup today. We're going to be talking with Custom GPT .ai. We're going to be talking with one of their users from MIT who's deployed this. And we're going to be talking about Tonic AI, which actually does some evaluation of RAG and does a scoring methodology. And those are all things that I think are going to be really interesting. We're going to have some conversation. We're going to show some demos. We're going to show some data from some of these solutions. We are also going to have Q&A at the end. So there is a Q&A function that you can use right now. And that is, you can use at any time. We'll queue up all the questions, as we go through. Looking forward to doing that. I think right now the most important thing is let's get Alden do Rosario up on the stage, and we can start talking about this. Alden, welcome.
Hey, Brad. Nice to join you.
Super happy to have you here today. All right, so RAG is a term that a lot of people have heard because they're like, LLMs, there are all these problems, but you have to use RAG. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Custom GPT.ai, why you founded it, what you were trying to accomplish, and then you can weave in how RAG fits into the solution.
Correct. So about 14 months ago, we founded Custom GPT, and it was actually a simple vision that this chat GPT was taking off and you had all these students using it like crazy in the classroom. And that hit an epiphany as such, wherein we said, if chat GPT is cool, what would be even cooler is if businesses can use it with their own data.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we came across the concept of RAG. And at that time, it was not being called RAG. It was just called ChatGPT with your data.
Yes.
And, we literally, started building it on a whim. And what shocked us was how many people actually needed it. And literally, it was like the community building it with us that then ultimately became known as RAG.
So when you first deployed, were you really just going to take a version of ChatGPT into the enterprise so it could be customized, or did you start with the idea that you were going to use RAG?
We started with the idea that it was going to be RAG. So on day one, it was create ChatGPT with your own data.
Yeah, I got it. And so one of the things is particularly interesting about what you've done is you have a no-code version of this. So everyone else that I know that has done RAG is maybe they've done something with the playground and OpenAI and maybe they've uploaded a couple documents, but almost everybody has had to do integration work. They've had to do the document transformation. They've had to set it up from a technical standpoint, but you have a no-code version of this.
Correct. And that was our vision from day one. Our vision from day one is if you need to be a coder or if you need to be technical, then we have failed. So it was true democratization. And we were very serious about this. Like in our mind, we have the perfect user whose only technical expertise should be able to use a browser. That's it. Anything beyond that is not expected.
So tell me, when you first started rolling into this out, what type of customers were coming to you? What type of data were they looking to ground their solution on? What were some of the challenges they came across that you had to build new features around?
Correct. So in the initial phase, which I would call the first 100 days, it was pretty much all the early adopters, the guys who run through walls, they will try anything. And they are the types who would work with us, even though the system is not ready or mistakes are being made, right? That was how it started from day one. There was also another key decision that was made from our end. While most people think of RAG as uploading of files and PDFs. We took the approach of a website sitemap first. So we literally took the Google approach and said, we will ingest website data, we will ingest YouTube videos, we will ingest podcasts and RSS feeds, and made it a more of a public data first. It almost took us 100 days before we started supporting PDFs. And that approach still stays to this day. And a key differentiator is how easy we are making it to bring in public website data.
That's really interesting. If you think about it, a lot of businesses, a significant amount of the material that they want to be out, that they want to be able to, their generative AI bot or chat assistant to be able to answer is on their website.
Yeah, absolutely. And so due to this, needless to say, the first use case is something called ticket deflection, right? Wherein, customers, if they cannot find what's on your website, they immediately go and put in a ticket, right? And now you have lots and lots of tickets coming in. And I learned this actually the hard way, which is as our service started taking off, I was getting literally 300 tickets a day, right? My wife was getting mad that I'm coming home at like 10, 11, 12:30, 1 o'clock at night. And it felt almost stupid that we were an AI company and not able to solve the problem with AI. So once we deployed the system onto our own website, almost like 90% of the queries are now being answered by the bot. And I'm happy to announce that I'm going home at a reasonable time now.
Well, you may have other things you have to focus on too. So yeah, deflection, I can imagine, is a really big use case. What are some of the other use cases that you're seeing out there?
The other use cases I'm seeing is where really accurate data and responses are needed. So again, when we started, it just started as RAG. But then customers told us what is really important to them. And customers like Doug and MIT, and we had customers in the legal space and the health space who told us about this concept of hallucination and why it is so critical to
Right.
fix it. So we made that a key focus of our system. And we also had the luxury that a lot of customers were signing up. So we ended up building the best anti-hallucination solution just based on their feedback.
So that's an additional feature beyond your standard implementation of RAG?
Correct. And they typically go hand in hand. Like, anybody can do basic RAG, but if you really want to attack hallucinations, you better run the tests. You better, work with real customers, listen to their feedback, and plug every aspect of the RAG pipeline. That is the big learning that we realized when tackling hallucination. It is not a spot fix, it is a pipeline fix at every element of the pipeline.
And one of those elements is the source data, because sometimes source data has conflicting information in it.
Yes, though that is not the most important one. There are other important ones like the query intent is a big part of fixing hallucination. The parsing strategies, the chunking strategies, the how you query the vector database, how you re-rank the chunks that are coming back from the vector database, right? So many, like you have the RAG pipeline and the customers will tell you, right? Because
Yes.
nobody knows the data better than the customer. And he will tell you when he thinks it's hallucinating.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then you have to go into your RAG pipeline and like literally like debugging an oil leak, you have to go and see where that hallucination is coming from.
Yeah, I was just looking at the chat too. They were talking about this idea that you needed technical skill initially. You mentioned Playground, Pinecone, vectorize the data. It was out of reach for those who didn't take the time to learn LangChain or Llama Index, or maybe didn't have the skill set. And so going to no code is a big opportunity. Maybe this would be a good time to bring Doug up because he was looking for a no-code solution. So maybe Doug Williams from MIT can join us. Hey, Doug. How are you?
Hey, good. Hey, Brett. Hey, Alden.
Hey, Doug, how's it going?
So tell us about how you wound up going down this path. Like, when did it start that you thought you might need a solution? How'd you wind up going and out and looking for things? How'd you choose?
Yeah, so great question. So we're here at MIT. Arguably have led a lot of the AI work overall. I think like everybody, including our friends at OpenAI, I think we were surprised by the paradigm shift with ChatGPTs. From where I'm working at the Martin Trust Center for Entrepreneurship, we try to operate like a startup as much as possible, in particular with orbit.mit.edu, our digital presence. We want to have solutions in place. But when we put solutions in place, the students are all using the latest pilots across all the vendors. We need to have something that that adds value, and for us, it was a trusted source of information, so we needed something where we could upload our own information, make it available, all the advantage of a chat interface, make it easy. We were doing some upgrades to our software. We didn't want to divert resources. We needed to be able to import data across a range of sources. The no code aspect was very advantageous for us because we were tied up on other things. But we wanted a range of options, and I'll be able to kind of show it. So Alden's solution really fit the bill. And then being able to work with early entrepreneurs, it has big advantages. You're working with the smartest people. And then we had a great set of users with the MIT community to let us know how we're doing.
Were the MIT users 200 of those 300 tickets you're getting every day, Alden?
No,
they come to me, but I'm probably 50 to 100 of tickets at one point, so early on. But
Doug was a big part of the hallucination solution, and that's where the community pushed us, because it's pretty easy to get to 97-98% anti-hallucination, but that's usually not good enough. Like,
Right.
When you're dealing with legal cases, when you're dealing with healthcare, 98% is as good as 100% useless.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Doug, I think you wanted to show what you've implemented and how you've configured it. So why don't you bring that up
Sure.
so that people can see it in action?
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of
Right.
questions coming in for chat. Hey, folks, if I'll try to extract them from chat when we go to the Q&A section, but there is a Q&A button at the bottom or in your nav bar. So if you can do that, it'll be easier for me to find them. Go ahead, Doug.
So this is the basic Orbit interface. We were doing updates on the profile pictures, the basic layout, and we had ChatGPT coming in. We wanted to start implementing technologies. So we've implemented the Chat MTC, Chat Martin Trust Center here, and we in the middle of the screen. This is available to non-logged in users, to the audience. We are beginning a pilot to open it up. So if you're interested in participating in the pilot and some of our Gen AI tools, you can find me on LinkedIn. But this is where we implemented custom GPT. So we did it as a pop-up window. We're able to put in some standard questions and customize it. This is actually the Entrepreneurship Center. That's a photo of it. Orbit is the little astronaut. These results are coming out from our data. So we don't have to worry about what the sources are. In fact, we provide the sources in all cases. So that was also very important, the citations for the sources. So, and these sources can be everything from web pages to documents to podcasts to videos. So
Right.
that's our product. And then Brad, I can show you what the back end looks like, if that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go there for, and I have a few other questions for you.
Yeah. So this is a custom GPT application interface dashboard. This is the our main application. We've hosted a few. There's a number of faculty, staff, clubs, student clubs that are using custom GPT. In this case, we're housing our main site with the, and I'll talk through the data. But we're also able, within less than an hour, set up additional chatbots. I think we can set up to 50 different chatbots. So it was rewarding to me to be able to support our climate and energy ventures. And then other clubs, I've shown them how to do it based on this. So that's been really valuable. And then I can go into the, I'll go into the interface for our project. And essentially everything works off the left navigation. So I can get a analytics dashboard. Not surprisingly, the majority of inquiries are coming from the US. I can get a sense how the day works. So busy at the first of the week, less busy over the weekends. I can look at conversations, queries per conversation. And then I can further drill down. And this is, we get direct feedback, but it's really helpful to see what's going on with all our pages. So we've indexed thousands of different sources, web pages, everything from our Zendesk knowledge base. We were able to do that through a interface. So we've got, I can check on what's going on with sources. I can see what are the questions I have. So I have an idea for a ratings review platform. We can give answers back using our discipline entrepreneurship methodology. I can see what's, what they're going. Here's somebody asking about the weather. Here's someone asking what we can do. So invaluable to see what the actual interactions are. And then I can download these and analyze them offline. And then
So you get all the conversation data.
we get all the conversation data, and we anonymize it. So we're really just focusing on, what are the inquiries? We went from being able to answer 80% of our inquiries to high 90s now, just working on it over time.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. So that's deflection right there, because they can answer a lot of those questions. They don't wind up sending you an email that then you have to respond to and all these other types of things.
That's right. Like how do you get into the center 24/7 is an important one, and we can go right there. So, and for me, I was tempted. There are settings that Alden provides where I can have it answer from our data, and if it can't answer it, go out in the internet. And Alden kept me from using that button so that we're always answering from our own data. Then the second piece is, that's the kind of user experience, analytics, what are people asking for? The second piece is how do we set things up? And so Custom GPT has a range of tools. They're all available for free. We can bring in sitemaps, create sitemaps. I've done both. Create sitemaps from, create sitemaps from Google results, web scraping, YouTube. We use the YouTube, we use the podcast. So all the work that Alden's done to pulling this data and then set it up so it maximizes the return and minimizes the hallucinations is invaluable for us. And we can access it all from the site settings, and we get control over how often things are updated. So I'm updating a lot of data weekly. I don't need to do it more often, but I've got automated control. So without us, without us having to develop all these tools, it's just available. So even though we
Yes.
have development resources, it's not an area that we want to put the time in. We can lean on Alden and his team.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you pointed out the data update. That's been one of the challenges a lot of organizations have had with RAG. They set it up, it works amazingly initially, or they see this big boost in performance, but then the data goes fallow because they're not updating the vector database with the changes. And so it sounds like you can schedule, you can do ad hoc updating so that then everything gets revectorized, and that way you're up to date.
That's exactly right. And things like removing deleted pages, if we take down a page, I don't have to worry about it, but I certainly don't want
Nice.
to reference it. So that was all great. And then really the last part is the customization. So here's where I put the picture in, the basic prompts, example questions, citations, how I answer that, how I respond. If things are slow or OpenAI is slow, they've been
Yes.
great lately, but that was an issue early. I can modify. So here's where I modify the
You choose different
conversation setting.
models.
Yeah. And so I can pick the models. I can pick whether citations are on. I always show them the branding, what I say when I don't have an answer. And then using my content. So this is the button I resisted doing. So I can always have an answer, but it might not be the right answer.
Right.
And then I can customize it. And the final part is we wanted a range of ways to integrate in the site. And so initially we're doing it as a pop-up. Over time, we'll more tightly integrate it. So I can start with a pop-up, no code, and then evolve. This is using the APIs. So we can begin to more tightly integrate it. So really had that whole range, and they're continuing to respond to users. That's advantage of the focus that Alden has.
So Alden, you have the no code version, but you also have an API, I believe, for developers.
Correct. Yeah. So we have the low code API, and basically what that allows you to do is with a couple of lines of code, you get a full-fledged RAG system. And rather than building everything yourself in LangChain and going down that hellish path of DevOps and everything that comes along with that.
Yeah, that makes sense for me. Okay, so I think what we should do is I've got more questions for you guys, but I think we should have you guys go backstage. We'll bring up Adam because he wanted to talk about some of the benchmarking he had done, and then we'll bring you back up for Q&A. Does that work?
That
Sounds
works.
good.
Okay.
Hey,
Adam,
Brett,
how are
nice to see
you?
ya. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing excellent. Thanks a lot for joining me today. I saw you're already
Absolutely.
active in the chat. People are asking questions in the chat. And they're
That's right.
mixing it up.
Trying to. I think one of our participants today was asking why call it hallucination? Why not just say the LLM is wrong?
Yeah.
And he technically is not. He is not wrong about that. We certainly could do that. And we were having a interesting conversation about that in the chats today.
Yeah, and it is there is a reason that people say that, because you could actually retrieve incorrect information. That's a different type of error. So it's information that already exists in the data set. Just in case people don't know, hallucinations came out because things were being generated by LLMs that were not in the data set. They were not in the training data. They were just assembled, and that's what happens sometimes when you have probabilities at work. They'll just start putting things together in random orders, and that's been really important. But
That's right.
Tonic AI, what are you doing, and tell me about Tonic Validate?
All right, excellent. So everyone, my name's Adam. I am the head of engineering at Tonic.ai, and I'm also one of Tonic AI's co-founders. So I've been with the company since its inception 6 years ago. So we're a bit older than Custom GPT, and we kind of predate all of the exciting things that we're seeing today with large language models and RAG systems. At its core, Tonic AI builds development tools. We build tools that help software development teams and data scientists do their jobs easier. And one of the tools that we have is called Tonic Validate, which is an evaluation framework for applications backed by large language models. And today, we're specifically talking about a subset of those applications called RAG systems, or retrieval augmented generation. So Tonic Validate can look at your RAG system, and it answers a seemingly simple, but actually fairly nuanced and complex question. How is my RAG system performing? How is the quality of the answers generated changing over time as my knowledge base changes, as the way that I develop my RAG system changes, and as the questions my users ask change? So that's what Tonic Validate helps to do.
Absolutely. Okay, so you have Validate, but then you decided to go to publish a series on Validate where you go through and you test different solutions against each other. Tell me more about that, and how does that methodology work? How's the application work?
Absolutely. So real quick on the blog series, the way that, so when we first started Tonic Validate, I mean, you know, this is true of any new product as you bring it to market, you need to go and make noise for yourself. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there, especially in this very new hot large language model space. So how do you get your name out there? How do you get people talking about you and learning about your offerings? So we came up with this idea to start doing what we call the RAG evaluation series. We take different RAG systems that are on the market, and we basically compare them in kind of a heads up competition, saying, hey, here's RAG system A, here's RAG system B. We're going to give them the same knowledge bases, the same set of questions, and then we're going to compare their outputs using our evaluation framework, Tonic Validate. And we're going to see which evaluation system, or which RAG system, excuse me, performs better in the current like test environment. And we kind of got connected with Custom GPT because we did one installment in this series. We compared OpenAI's RAG assistant to Custom GPT, and Custom GPT performed very well. And then the performance was very strong. We kind of started talking with Alden and others at Custom GPT. And then we decided to kind of start working together more closely. And what that led to today is that Custom GPT uses Tonic Validate's evaluation framework in their own internal RAG pipelines for all of their customers. So for everyone on the call today that's currently using just Custom GPT, and for those on the call that aren't using it yet but are going to once this webinar is over, you know, you can rest assured that you guys are getting a high quality output from Custom GPT, in part due to the wonderful development they've done, but also in part to the work that Tonic Validate does to ensure the quality of the RAG pipelines they generate is increasing over time and not unknowingly decreasing.
So how do you measure this?
So there's a lot of different ways to kind of evaluate a RAG system. And we typically, each dimension on which we kind of look at the output of a RAG system, we call those metrics. So there's different metrics that one can use to kind of evaluate a RAG system. Some metrics are very simple. For example, I could look at a metric that is going to give me a yes or no. Is the answer that I'm looking for more than 25 characters in length, or rather, perhaps is my answer sufficiently succinct? Is it under 100 words? That is a metric that one could use to kind of determine the quality of an output. But you can get much more complex in how you kind of evaluate a RAG system. For example, you might want to look at the answer generated by the RAG and the context used to generate that answer, and kind of get an understanding. How much of the answer is derived from that context? You know, is there a portion of this answer that did not come from the context, and perhaps the LLM hallucinated, or perhaps it was kind of pulling information from its own internal training data set and not from the context? That's one thing you could look at. You could, for every question that you test on, have kind of a human generated reference answer, and then compare the reference answer to the RAG answer and kind of determine, hey, what's the similarity here? Obviously, I want my RAG generated answers to be as close as possible to the human generated reference answers. You can also, look at things like how relevant is the context retrieved to the question? How consistent is the answer with the context? There's a lot of ways to look at it. And then as you get into larger enterprises, you might care about things like, hey, does my answer, is it toxic? Does it contain hate speech or bias? You want to be on the lookout for that. Or maybe you're working on very sensitive data. and you care about ensuring that your RAG system doesn't retrieve what could be considered sensitive information like PII or PHI, or that your answer isn't divulging someone's SSN, things of this nature. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of evaluate a RAG system, and it's very context and industry specific.
Got it. And you're doing the evaluation on the logs as opposed to at runtime. Is that correct?
We do both, believe it or not. There's kind of two ways that you can operate with Tonic Validate. And in fact, I know at some point I'm going to be giving a demo today. I think maybe now I should share my screen and I can kind of get into it. Yeah, that's excellent. So I'm going to actually take a step back for a second, and Brett, then I am going to answer your question. Tonic Validate comes in two parts. Part one is an open source MIT licensed Python SDK that anyone can use. The SDK can work standalone, and it will essentially compute metrics on your RAG system. We have hundreds or thousands of users using this today, every day, in their pipelines and production and development, etc. Go and check out the SDK and start using it. You'll get a lot of value out of it. It's all open source. If you have questions, just file GitHub issues and we'll make sure to get back to you. And the SDK is here, tonic_validate. If you like it, make sure to give us a star, and I'll make sure to also drop a link to this into the questions and comments so folks can kind of get there. But I think the question you asked is, well, hey, how do we call into this? Is it kind of done like in a batch process offline, or can it be done in a production use case as well? So the way that you get started with Tonic Validate is by essentially just adding a few lines of Python code into your existing applications. You can also add this into your CI/CD pipelines. So at a high level, the way this works is you provide a set of questions and answers that you want to test your application against. We call that a benchmark. Here I'm providing a single question and a single answer, but these are lists and you can provide as many of each as you like. It's optional to provide reference answers. You don't have to provide them. And then the magic really comes when you call the score method. When you call the score method, we iterate over all of the questions and answers that you're providing, and then we call into your RAG system via this callback that you provide. We examine the answer provided by the RAG, we examine the context retrieved from the RAG system, and then we're able to compute a set of scores. And then the scores that we generate, or rather the metrics that we generate, are kind of encapsulated in this run variable that's returned from the method, which is essentially a pandas data frame. And
absolutely,
the way that we call this score method, you could call it kind of as part of like a CI/CD process. Basically, hey, every time someone makes a commit into your master or main branch, let's run the evaluation to make sure that our development has improved quality and not decreased quality. You can also run it in a production use case where you are calling scores on live questions and answers provided by users, so that you can kind of track how things are trending in production. For those really quickly that are interested in that CI/CD use case, we also have a set of GitHub actions that you can use, which make it very easy to integrate our free and open source SDK into your existing CI/CD pipelines. So if you're curious about how to kind of evaluate RAGs on a continuous automated basis as part of development, go check that out. And of course, all of this is a prelude into the UI that we also have for customers that kind of make it easier to evaluate your RAG system by providing the ability to search, evaluate, monitor, and visualize your RAG performance.
Let's take a look.
Absolutely. So this is also free. So folks, go to validate.tonic.ai. You can create an account today and sign up and start using. When you first log in, you're going to go create a project. I'm going to call this webinar demo, my project. A project is simply a way of testing a given application. Typically, for a given application, you'll have one or more projects that you're using. So I'm going to create this webinar demo. To get started, it's relatively simple. Go install the Python library that we were showing on GitHub a few moments ago, and then use this code snippet right there. This code snippet that I'm highlighting here is essentially what I just showed you in GitHub. This is how you actually evaluate your RAG system. These two additional lines at the bottom is the special part. With these two additional lines, you're actually sending the results of the evaluation to our web server so that you can start visualizing and monitoring performance.
Right.
Now, for some on the call, you're going to say, hey, wait a second, my RAG system is very sensitive. The context, the answers, it's all very proprietary. I can't send it to you. Rest assured, you can also deploy our UI on your servers in a self-hosted fashion. Tonic.ai works with some of the largest companies on the planet, and we work with very sensitive data sets, and all of the solutions we provide are available in a self-hosted fashion. So going back here, once we've done this, we're going to go through a single project today. this is a set of Paul Graham essays that I had built a RAG system around. And I'm asking questions about the contents of these essays. Okay, so right now I'm seeing how my RAG system is trending over time. These scores are kind of averaged across all metrics and all questions. So I can see, hey, I'm trending upward. This is great. But how am I doing on individual metrics? Well, answer similarity is doing quite well. But what about retrieval precision, where we kind of look at how the context is relevant to the provided answer? Well, I can see here it's also trending up. But going down on this list, I see some of the individual questions in the run are actually not doing so hot. Like, it's possible for an average to go up where individual items are actually decreasing in quality. So let's look at this guy. This is clearly just going down and down and down. So if I click on it, I'm actually now looking at the performance of a single question across a single metric. And I can in fact see, hey, wait a second, something's going on here. So this is the reason to start digging in. I can go further into all of this. For example, I can look at an individual run event. I can see the distribution of scores for a given run. I can look at those scores here if I want to kind of dig into specific scores for specific questions. And for every run, you can optionally upload metadata for that run, so you can do additional tracking and logging. So for example, in this run, I know I was using GPT-4 32K as my LLM evaluator. These are the parameters I was using in my RAG system during this evaluation. And I was using a system prompt associated to this GUID so that I can kind of track exactly what was happening when I did this evaluation.
Right.
Excellent. So there's a lot more to show in Tonic Validate, but I know that we want to bring others on stage, and there's possibly some questions that we want to get answered. So I encourage folks, go check it out, validate.tonic.ai. And Brett, hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me about the specific run you did against, I think, comparing CustomGPT.ai versus OpenAI.
Oh, so in that run, we were actually, I'm glad that I showed the project for the Paul Graham essays. So in that specific installment of the evaluation series, we took 212 essays written by Paul Graham. Paul Graham is the founder of Y Combinator. He is, I think, what many would consider to be a startup guru. And his essays are typically about startups and like, what it takes to create a startup and just things related to startups. So we use that as our knowledge base. We uploaded it into CustomGPT. And then we also uploaded it into the OpenAI RAG Assistant. And then what we did is essentially we have a set of, I think it was either 50 or 55 test questions that we use for the evaluation. And we use the same set of questions across all heads of competitions in our RAG evaluation series. And then we were really, I really want to commend the CustomGPT team. We were really blown away by the scores. CustomGPT, I want to cite exact numbers, but I'm just not going to be able to remember them because I'm kind of blanking on it. But I do remember that we were basically looking at just the answer similarity metric for that evaluation. And CustomGPT not only had just an insane number of 4 and 5s, which is basically a very strong answer, but what was even more noteworthy, I think, is that even really strong RAG systems are going to sometimes give answers which are just complete bogus, and they're going to score very low on that answer similarity metric. CustomGPT had almost no poorly performing answers. And I thought that was really noteworthy, and I really liked that. And they did really great in that heads-up competition. And it was it caused us to, I think I remember emailing Alden I think shortly after that, and we kind of started chatting as founders might do. And that's where we've kind of was kind of the start of everything.
That's great. All right. Well, it's probably a good cue to bring Doug and Alden back up on stage so we can go to the Q&A section. But as they're coming up, I'll just ask you one other question, Adam. So, or make a comment and then you can respond to it. But this similarity score is a really important thing because it's not just, is it accurate, but can you have confidence that when people ask the same question, like hundreds of different people ask the same question, they're going to get a similar answer?
Right. It's almost like what is the repeatability of your RAG system? Answer repeatability. That is that's a very interesting metric that I think we likely should add into our SDK. I will say that repeatability is going to come in 2 components, right? You need to make sure your RAG system is repeatedly retrieving the same context. And then 2, you need to make sure your LLM the temperature of your LLM essentially is not too high, where you're not necessarily getting determinism, but at least the LLM is giving a somewhat repeatable, consistent result. That's probably how it needs to be judged. But yeah, that would be an interesting metric to add. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Alden and Doug, thanks for rejoining us. All right. So we have a number of questions in here. So I'm gonna read off one, which is a little bit longer, but I'm gonna do at least the first part of it. I think this one's gonna be for you, Alden. Actually, before I do that, was there anything you wanted to, Alden or Doug, you wanted to comment on in terms of what Adam was just talking about?
No, not much. We are really thankful to have like a true benchmark for RAG systems, because till now, most of the focus has been on like foundational LLMs, and everybody is running all these benchmarks for foundational, but we are very happy now that there is a true benchmark for RAG.
All right, great. All right, so there is a question here from the audience. When custom GPT is built upon ChatGPT, I guess OpenAI in this case, what does that imply when you ask a prompt? Is it correct that I understand that the prompt goes to the OpenAI model, retrieves some sort of answer, and then the reply is validated against your local data, or something else? There's some other things in here, but like maybe you can tell people what this is, what it's actually doing in the flow.
Correct. What it's doing is it is searching your knowledge base and bringing together some snippets of knowledge from your knowledge base, right? And that match happens with these things called vector databases. And we also added our own flavor of re-ranking and what that information should be relative to the question. So once you have that little bit of what we call context, the context is sent to GPT-4, and GPT-4 is instructed to answer the question, along with this little other thing that is also there called a persona. So the call would be something like, please act like Doug Williams, and this is how he talks, and here's the question, and here's the context. And then the LLM will respond accordingly.
And so Alden, the data that we have, our YouTube videos, our podcasts, knowledge base, when we upload it, it's all being vectorized in custom GPT servers. And
Exactly.
then that's what's passed to OpenAI to help OpenAI. What it does is it understands language and helps build a response, but from our vectorized information. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. The data is chunked, it is vectorized, it is stored in Pinecone. We don't bother too much with the vector database side, but we do bother a lot with what Pinecone query goes in, how the chunks are re-ranked, what would be the relevant chunks to send to the GPT-4 API call. Those things are important consideration to have good accuracy.
A key part of grounding, just for everybody, is that you actually pull data from your data source first. And then, as Doug said, you're basically using the LLM just to summarize and recast the information or extract the right information from that data. It's when operating properly, they're not really drawing from data from their training data. They're drawing, the only thing they get from their training data is how to reformulate knowledge in a way that's easy for people to understand.
Grammar.
It should be, I
That's
think it
the
should be
big
called
one.
out. Sorry, Doug, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah. So the GPT gives us a grammar, but we want to provide the data sources, and in a vectorized, we're not really helping add to their training data. We're using our own data.
Absolutely.
I think it should be called out for some of the participants today that are maybe on the less technical side. You might be asking yourself, well, why do I need a RAG system? I can just take all of my data and just paste it into the chat window in ChatGPT, and I can get my answer from there. Well, the whole point of retrieval augmented generation is that actually you can't do that, because I think as many folks know, large language models typically have like a finite amount of text that you can kind of feed to it and still get an answer out. And this is called a context window. And it's typically on the order of tens of thousands of words that you can kind of feed in all at once. And for most organizations, forget, individuals, but for most organizations, the amount of data you have is typically orders of magnitude more than that. So what a retrieval augmented generation system does is it finds just the relevant pieces of text within your corpus of documents and feeds that to the LLM, because you can't possibly feed everything into the LLM. So that, think of RAG as almost like it's going to search your data, find the relevant bits for the question that's being asked, and feed that to the LLM to kind of make things more efficient.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And hopefully that clarifies that for a lot of people, because I know that is a continual source of sort of misunderstanding, that you're not actually pulling from the LLM's data. And the context windows as well, they have retrieval problems. In fact, there would be information in there that it won't be able to pull back. The other issue with the context windows is it doesn't give you an easy way to do citations and reference other documents. So I think that's really important. So we have another question here. This would be for Alden, I believe. Is it possible to fine tune custom GPT?
Yes, but not in the way that people think of fine tuning in a classical way, right? Fine tuning in a classical way is where people go into the LLM and change the weights, and you need all these coders and engineers to do stuff. Fine tuning in RAG is done using what we call a persona feature. You can, in plain English, specify how you want the chat or the GPT to behave and specify it in plain English, right? That's the big difference. And that's where like no code and low cost and quick responses come into play, right? And so we have many customers, they'll build one GPT, it'll behave in a certain way, they have a set of instructions, then they'll build another one and that'll act as a sales agent and have a different set of instructions.
Yeah, absolutely. So this idea, in fact, they asked about these as well. Fine tuning has a very specific technical meaning in the AI world. But yes, you can answer questions in different ways. You can use slang, bias towards different types of language and response. So that's pretty straightforward. There's another question here. Is it possible to observe hallucinations according to the model's output log likelihoods? So I think what they're asking here is in terms of the probabilities. Do you provide that data back when you have answers? Do you give them the score?
Currently, no, but coming soon. In fact, our plan is to take Adam's system, compute basically the hallucination score, and show it as part of the log entry, right? And it's part of the plan is not just the hallucination score, but any of the other metrics that would be important. Like Adam mentioned, toxicity, and then there are other metrics that are coming along, like, is the sales team interested in this query? Is this a product feature that has been requested? Like the analysis of the logs is going to become its own customer intelligence / analytics module, right? And in keeping with our no code mantra, you shouldn't have to code anything or have any technical knowledge to take advantage of that. Should be like Google Analytics, but for a lot less technical user.
Right. All right, we have another question here. As someone who works within the healthcare and life sciences industries, being able to create repeatable and legally approvable output is mandatory. I'd love to hear how the speakers have worked with healthcare related clients.
That is a real, that can be a real challenge, as I'm sure, obviously the person asking the question knows, but I'm sure other people know as well. As soon as you start dealing with health information, there's a few considerations you have. One is obviously privacy, laws dictated under HIPAA. So for example, if you're going to be sending any data controlled by HIPAA to a large language model, or to any service for that matter, you need to make sure the necessary controls are in place to make sure that you're adhering to the law. But beyond that, typically like the approvers of things to do with medical, like the FDA and others, have requirements around explainability. In terms, for example, if you're creating a chatbot that's gonna that's going to help people make any type of medical decision, you need to have explainability around, how the model or the AI system arrived at that decision, for auditing purposes and for other reasons as well. That has historically been kind of a challenge for those offering AI solutions in the medical space. Tonic.ai specifically works with a large number of healthcare organizations. We do so via Validate, but also through our other products. So I think to the person that asked this question, feel free to reach out to us. You can kind of reach out to us on our website, tonic.ai, and we can talk to you about how we help others in the healthcare space work with sensitive data and work with AI models. And Alden, I'm sure you have more to say.
Yeah, for us too, it's quite interesting to see like the number of health companies using it. And in healthcare, for us, the biggest thing was the hallucination part. In fact, besides Doug, I have another customer, early customer who comes to mind, for whom the hallucination threshold was extremely low. And he was in the therapy space. So you can understand why the hallucination aspect was so low. One thing we don't get into is we don't get into PII or HIPAA, but there are a lot of use cases emerging where just using public data, using the PDF people already have, and making the answers a lot faster to get, either for internal employees or for customers, right? If the hallucination thresholds are within reason, right? Even though it's an extremely high threshold, like there are use cases emerging in the healthcare space. That said, I don't think AI is yet at a point where, you can have a customer directly talking to an AI and doing diagnosis or PII stuff. That is probably a couple of months or years away.
What I always tell people is it really depends on the use case. Like you can look at the industry, and different industries have different standards, but they don't have those same requirements for every use case. There are certain types of things your employees might be doing, or even your patients might be doing, that are not related to that. Now, you might want to have some additional features on top of that for redaction, or you really have to look at your data retention policies and all those other types of things. But I always tell people, look at the use case first, because you probably have a lot of use cases that would comply. And we need to wrap this up. I'll do just one last really quick hitter question here for you, Alden, and then we'll give everyone a chance to say how you can follow up if you have additional questions and things like that. And we'll provide all these questions. I think if you're logged in as you registered, we'll probably be able to answer them separately. Alden, there is a question around privacy in a couple of different areas. One is around Europe, in terms of EU data privacy laws, server locations, those types of things, and then a more general one around privacy in general, how the data is used, how you protect it.
Correct. So in terms of GDPR and SOC 2, we just got recently SOC 2 certified, right? The data is stored though in the US. And the best part about RAG and a solution like ours is there is absolutely no training going on, right? We are using the GPT-4 API. OpenAI says that they don't train on that. For our enterprise customers, we do Microsoft Azure, OpenAI, that has like absolutely zero training. So the whole training aspect is out of the picture. We also understand that even within a single account, every GPT is separate. So there is no training from one going to the other or any form of training. So that takes care of a lot of the privacy and the security issues.
Okay, that's great. A couple of questions in the chat about being able to rewatch this. Yes, if you just come back to that same URL, you should be able to continue to rewatch that through that link. We will also put this up on YouTube probably in the next week, so you'll be able to share it more widely for people who were not registered for the event, if you want some of your colleagues to see that. Really quickly, Adam, how can people learn more about Tonic?
Great question, thank you. So you can always go to our GitHub repository for Tonic Validate. The repository is just tonic_validate. Or you can check us out at tonic.ai/validate, and you can learn more there.
Doug, where should people go to check out your implementation here and learn more about the center?
Orbit custom.mit.edu.
Perfect. And Alden, wrap us up.
Thank you so much. So for us, it is customgpt.ai. And
Easy
Really
enough.
appreciate
Everybody
it.
should go there. That's great. I'm Brett Kinsella. I'm really happy everybody was able to come out today. We'll try to follow up with as many of these questions as we can offline, but also you can connect with these folks here on stage. I know they're very responsive to these types of questions. Great to have everyone here. RAG, it's something I think you probably learned a lot today about this. It is a very important implementation methodology people are putting out, and Alden and customgpt.ai has provided a no-code version of that, which is fairly novel. We don't see that every day.